from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13. I need to set the scene. I think I'm going to read a couple of verses before that. Is that okay with you? Jesus is at home, in his hometown, and he's been speaking in the synagogue. While he was still speaking, says the text in verse 46, chapter 12. While he was still speaking to the crowds, his mother and his brothers were standing outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Look, Jesus, your mother and your brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." But to the one who had told him this, Jesus replied, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" And pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Abba Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and he sat there while the crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, so they sprang up quickly, and since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen." Thus ends the reading of the word. You know, this parable of the sower is about the first paper that any seminarian has to write. It's on the parable of the sower. It was my first paper in seminary. I had to rewrite it because I got it wrong. We talk about Jesus' parables, and we talk about how Jesus taught in parables, and there's sometimes confusion about whether or not what he's talking about is really a parable or an allegory. An allegory is a symbolic story. A parable, remember, is a story that's designed to do what? Turn your world upside down. You all have it, no? Everybody's afraid they're going to get the wrong answer. I promise I won't put you down. Girl Scouts on it. This parable today is always interpreted as a symbolic story. Because everybody says, well, the seed is the good news. The seed is the Word of God. But can I talk with you first about seeds? Can we talk about germination for a minute? Is that okay with you? Because I looked it up. So I'm sorry you're going to hear about it. Now, a seed is a thing that has a hard coat around it, right? A seed. You take a seed and you plant it in the ground. Now, you have to know exactly what is a good depth for that particular seed, right? When the seed gets into good soil, then the seed captures moisture. And as it captures moisture, the seed begins to swell. And as it begins to swell, the seed breaks open and a radical emerges. The other name for the radical is root. The radical emerges and finds its way into the soil seeking more moisture and more nutrients. And as it seeks more moisture and more nutrients, then the seed begins to expand more and grow more, and the next thing that happens is a stem comes out, or also called a plumule, comes out of the seed and begins to go not down like the radical, but up. It is freed to move up, and it's going toward the light. As a matter of fact, the stem is lifted up, or lifts up the seed toward the light, where it seeks out sunlight and oxygen so that it can undergo what we call photosynthesis. The other things that go up with that little plumule are two things called, and Dick and I had to go over the pronunciation of this word, and to you who are horticulturalists, if I blew it, oh well. Cotyledons, that are the two beginner leaves that come up with the stem. And those two beginner leaves have in them extra nutrients that they carry up through the soil. And in between those two leaves, there's a bud. And that bud is the hope of a flower that will come to life, or a plant that will come to life. And while that's happening, that isn't just one radical that's down there. That radical has sent out more radicals, more roots. And there are many of them searching for nutrients and searching for moisture so that they can continue the plant growth. Now, Jesus was not a farmer. And the people that he was talking to when he was telling this parable of the sower, maybe there were one or two farmers in there, but there were a bunch of them who were fishermen and tax collectors and sinners and all those folks who were hanging out. So probably who didn't have a great idea of what happens when you sow seeds. And I don't think that Jesus probably had that third grade germinating project, where, like we all did, where we put the seed in and watched it grow. So I'm not sure where Jesus got this parable, but he knew something about how seeds grow or don't grow. And very starkly has an image for everyone who is listening about what happens to seed when it doesn't make it to the right soil, when it falls on the path which is hard packed, and it never even gets into the ground. What happens to it? It gets devoured by birds, scooped up and taken away by birds, so it doesn't even begin to have a chance. And then there's the next seed that falls into shallow, dry soil and searches for water, and maybe gets a little bit of water and sprouts up with great hope, but is scorched by the sun because there isn't enough water to give it life. And then there's the seed that falls among the thorns, and the thorns grow up around the plant. There may be plenty of moisture in the soil, but not only is that plant growing up, but the thorns are growing up around it, and the thorns are affecting its growth, and the thorns are killing it and choking it. And then there's the seed that falls in the good soil, where it's going to find plenty of moisture and plenty of nutrients. Now, last week, you know that I preached about the tax collectors and the sinners, and how they became the new wineskins for Jesus' good news, for the new Word of God. And Charles came up to me and he said, "Now, Amanda, I like your idea, but I'm wondering how open were those tax collectors and sinners to hear the word that Jesus preached, to hear that good news? How open were they?" And I think what happens this week is the parable of the sower answers that question, that there were